So there we go. We're all official now, I guess. And as we go through, if you want to put your comments in the chat, we'll get back to them, but Aaron is going to present to us, share his thoughts, and then at the end of that, we will have some time for Q&A. But if something kind of crosses your mind now and you're afraid you'll kind of lose it, feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll cycle back to that. Aaron, we did share your bio with everyone, but I just thank you for being with us. Just a few quick things. He is the founder and CEO of PRprophet, which is an AI-driven
SaaS platform.
Right. And I understand it's the first ever generative and predictive designed specifically for the PR community. So we appreciate that take on it. List of accomplishments that are quite lengthy. I don't want to cut into too much of our time, but just a few things.
Okay. You don't have to. It's okay.
Okay. Well, if there's anything specific that you want to share other than you're a proud George Washington University alum and a long distance avid runner and competitive triathlete, we'd love to hear that. So, Aaron?
I will get into it. Thank you so much. Yep. So I didn't even think about how timely the naming of Prophet might be given my audience, but it's kind of funny. But I was telling Ginny this when she reached out to me. Even though I'm not part of your organization, one, I had no idea that it existed. I let my executive director at my temple know, and if he hasn't signed up, he will. Two, I kind of consider myself a religious communicator because I was president of my temple for the past 3 years through COVID. And as you can all appreciate, 90% of that job outside of, fundraising and dealing with the congregation and their needs is, of course, communication. So I have a great appreciation for what you all do every day, which is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job. So I have a couple of slides. By a couple, I mean not too many, I promise. I speak kind of quickly. I really try not to curse, but I promise if I do, I'll apologize. And then if you're not on mute, if everybody can go on mute just for now, that'd be helpful. And Ginny, I don't know how you want to handle Q&A, but I find that I'll talk a little bit, do a little bit of an explainer, this world of AI and comms, and then I'm happy to open it up for Q&A because there's always lots of questions, either through chat or however you want to manage it through voice as well as a human. So here's the bio slide, Ginny. Real quick. So I am a communicator. I've been doing this for 3 decades. I had the privilege of being able to build a platform for me and for us versus being just kind of a coder or a tech person. I work with those folks. I think they're brilliant and amazing. But I built a platform, the idea was pitched and started back in 2019. And we built the MVP, which stands for Minimal Viable Product. In 2020, I left my day job and handed over to my successor. So I'd run a global agency called KWT Global for about 16, 17 years. Before that, I'd been in many different leadership roles at agencies, and I handed over to my successor, and many people, including my family, they're like, why are you leaving your day job? And what is this thing called AI? And this is like 3 years ago. And they legitimately thought I was crazy, which is a whole nother discussion for another day because I might be, but related to this, I've always been very interested in data and also fascinated by the fact that as PR and comms people, we don't have a whole lot of data to support our campaigns, especially earned media and social. We use our experience, our gut instinct, and our expertise, which is fine, but sometimes it's not enough. I'm also a journalist with a lowercase j, and that I have my own podcast called Brand on Purpose, which highlights companies that do well by doing good. I've been doing it for a little bit over 3 years.
I just wanted to see if I could record it.
Oh, it's being recorded. Yep, it's being recorded. And I've also worked for Forbes for the last 10 years as a contributor. And I mentioned that because that was part of the impetus for why I built Prophet. I got a lot of very bad pitches I still get pitches, even though I stopped writing for Forbes in 2021, I still get pitches for my column. And that's because the data that's out there and the databases that are out there are not up to date, and they're flawed in many, many ways. So, and I'm very active in the industry. If you're familiar with PRSA, I ran New York last year, and I am a very proud GW grad, and very active at the school. I'm on their board of the School of Media and Public Affairs. I also lecture very frequently there. So I'm very, very vested in the industry. And if I sound hoarse, it's probably because of the air that I'm breathing. So I apologize for that. Just a little bit about Prophet. I'm going to explain what generative and predictive AI means, especially as it relates to our world. But ultimately, my goal is to help us become more performative, productive, and predictive as communicators. And I'll explain what that means as well. A couple quick facts. So I founded the company officially in 2020. We launched in 2021. I'm not at One World Trade now, but typically you can find me at One World Trade Center. It's where our headquarters is. We're owned by a company called Stagwell Global, which is run by a guy named Mark Penn, who is a pretty well-known political strategist and pollster. He was in the Clinton White House for 2 terms. He also was chief strategy officer at Microsoft, so he knows a thing or two about the intersection of marketing and technology. And he used to run a big global PR agency called BCW, which used to be called Burson Marsteller. We've got about 45 customers and 1,500 active users on the platform, mostly brands and organizations, as well as NGOs. And we've been able to white label it as well. And that means, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, it means that you can call it whatever you want. We'll basically reskin the platform and put your name on top of it. It'll just say powered by Prophet, kind of like Intel Inside, if you think about that in that way. This is interesting. So back in 2019, if anybody likes The New Yorker, reads The New Yorker, I'm a huge fan. John Seabrook wrote, I think, the first and most seminal piece on GPT-2. And back then in 2019, what he did is he wrote a paragraph on his own, and then he had GPT-2 rewrite it. It's a 10,000 word essay. It did not go so well. It hallucinated just like ChatGPT does. And it was very rocky. And at the time, we were on a panel together. This was 2 years ago. We only had like 30 people show up to this webinar, by the way. Nobody really cared. This is even during COVID. And at the time, we all decided, this generative AI thing, it's going to happen, but probably not for 10 years. So here we are a couple of years later, and it's pretty exciting. It's happening as of November of last year, when OpenAI, which is backed by Microsoft, released ChatGPT into the universe. Just for reference, and from my point of view, which not everybody always agrees with, ChatGPT is interesting. It's cool, but it's a toy. It's not a tool. We can build tools on top of OpenAI, which is what ChatGPT is built on top of. But it is a sampling, and it is a good way to experiment with generative AI. But it is not necessarily the holy grail. It's not necessarily what you would use, and I wouldn't necessarily use it for my day job. It's a perfect storm for what we call comms tech right now. You have ChatGPT, so generative AI is something that's becoming more and more prominent. Newsrooms are shrinking. There's a rise in freelancers. There's continuous economic uncertainty. I don't know when the recession is going to happen, because we've been talking about it for 2 years, but we'll see. I don't know. But anytime there's kind of uncertainty, people do turn to austerity measures and sometimes to technology to help displace and or augment human beings. Newsrooms have been using AI for years. They just haven't been telling you that. Now they're having to disclose that. Bloomberg has been using it, mostly for box scores and earnings digest. The Guardian started using it a few years ago. And of course, there is a lot of disinformation and misinformation in the market. I'm going to address that and how AI might be able to help solve for it, and at the same time, potentially accelerate it. And then there's this thing called the large language model, which I will talk about in just a second, because that is what generative AI is built on. So I thought I would just do a little bit of an explainer. Just bear with me here. I've been doing this for a few weeks now. I kind of built a bunch of slides that just kind of take us through different terms and terminology and how this whole thing works, mostly because I'm fascinated by it. Generative AI, as we all know, it's basically part of what they're calling artificial intelligence, but there's really nothing artificial about it. It's human. It's based on humans. And it's generating all types of data, not just words, but also images, audio. There are platforms that can generate code for you, which is pretty cool. Simulations, 3D objects, videos. It's pretty insane in what's happening with generative AI. Basically, it's anything that requires a prompt. You're prompting it. You're saying, I want to do this. I want to do a video of a cat doing gymnastics on a electric car, or whatever it is, and it'll do it for you based on a large language model, based on a data lake. They call them data lakes, which is basically the web plus, plus, plus. It's scouring it and it's putting these things together for you. Generative AI is interesting. Quite frankly, I'm way more interested in predictive AI, and that's where Prophet started. Because my background's PR, because my background's mostly working with journalists, I tried to solve for the age-old question, who's going to be interested in my story idea, my pitch? It could be a fundraiser. It could be a new member of our team, whatever it is, or a thought leadership piece. How do I know who's interested? I don't. But predictive AI uses a combination of what we call vectoring, machine learning, and semantic search. Semantic search is the opposite, or it's a sibling to Boolean search. So Boolean search is when you go into Google and you type in something. It's using keywords to find what it is you're looking for. Oftentimes it's me being a hypochondriac trying to figure out, am I going to die today or 30 years from now because I'm not feeling so great? Semantic search is like Boolean search on steroids. It's providing context around it. So it's not misinterpreting a word that can be used in 3 or 4 different ways, but it's trying to find out your intent and the proximity of your interest in what you're looking for. In our world, that means, why can't I look at past media coverage to then use machine learning and apply my pitch against past media coverage to surface what reporters would be interested in my pitch and the sentiment they might have if they write? That's what predictive AI is to me and what it is to us. So here's how I think about it. I think about it in terms of a communications engineer, which is a mindset, not a skill set. So don't be afraid. I can't code. I work with coders. I work with developers. I give them my workflow, what's in my brain on a spreadsheet, and they create code. But the communications engineer is going to be predictive and generative, because I want to know who's going to be interested in my story idea, but also, how do I make my story idea more interesting? Making it more interesting is where generative comes in. And I'll show you that in a second. I don't know if there's any Ted Lasso fans, but I'm a huge fan. I always like this. So again, mindset, not a skill set. What we're trying to do is create a platform, and there'll be multiple platforms like this that sit at the intersection of art, which is what we do, and science to backstop what we do. I appreciate narrative. I appreciate our tradecraft, because this is what I chose for my living, even though my mom, who's, God bless her, 92 years old, still has no idea what I do for a living. I'm in business, she says. But ultimately, the communications engineer has an agility about them. They don't focus on workflow. They are they have like flywheel tech stacks, right? Different tools and software platforms to be able to be predictive and generative, to see around corners, identify trends, identify potential threats for mis and disinformation, surface it and counter it, and ultimately protect our brand. I use that term very broadly, our organizational safety, our reputation, and our integrity. And so many tools that are out there right now are focused on how did I do, media monitoring, not how do I do better. I think that's where AI comes in. So I like to quote the CEO of Microsoft, because one of the questions that keeps coming up over and over and over again is, oh my God, is this the singularity? Are we being replaced by robots? What are the machines taking over? Is this like Space Odyssey stuff? I know I'm showing my age there. The answer is no. To me, this is like when I ran my agency, I'd hire people and I'd be like, can this person get me like 50, 60% of the way there on a draft? And if they can, awesome. That's my expectation. I come in over the top. Basically, comms tech tools, especially generative AI, will help us with that. They're like an assistant. They're like, you're the coach, they're the assistant. And to me, again, it's all about being predictive, productive, and performative. Now, when I think about kind of the future, and I know this seems a little harsh and maybe a little binary, but I kind of call it slay today or sink tomorrow. AI is not going to take your job, but you might not have a job unless you really understand what AI can do to help you perform better in your job. And I think there's a very simple diagram, which is, how do I replace my instinct with intelligence, or at least supplement it? How do I not view media as media databases, but as media targets? And ultimately, how do I save time, right? At the same time, without sacrificing the quality of what I'm doing. People often ask me, well, what should I read to get inspired? And there's so many books. This book, actually, I hate to use another New Yorker reference, but Jill Lepore, who is one of my favorite, if I could marry Jill Lepore's brain, if I had to get remarried again, I would just marry her brain. She is an incredible, prolific author, Pulitzer Prize nominated individual. She wrote this book called If Then, and she goes way back to the 50s. I mean, if you really want to go way back to the Turing test, you can. AI is not new. It's been around a long time. She goes back into the 50s when ad agencies were using a machine called the People Machine. I kid you not, it was called the People Machine, to determine what consumers would be interested in, like, soap and dishwasher fluid and detergent and things like that. And then a campaign, the Kennedy campaign, used it for the first time to poll Americans to understand where their interests would lie and trends would lie, to be able to then map Kennedy's campaign, his messages, his stump speeches towards consumer interests. But they used a huge machine that you see there from the 50s that ultimately helped him in many ways resonate better with the American people and win the 1960 election. There was a lot of controversy around this back then. I was born 10 years later, for the record. But this book goes into it in great depth, and all the machinations, no pun intended, around it. And it's fascinating. Just as us all to say that this is not new. But why is it important? It's not. I think it's hugely consequential for us. It's fundamentally going to change the way we work. It's going to change the PR agency business model. It's going to change in-house models. It's going to change how we produce, deliver, and measure our work. And ultimately, you're talking about like a $2 trillion industry by 2030. Quick explainers, text-to-text generation, large language models. Basically, when you go into ChatGPT or Bard or even Prophet, right, it's being trained on large amounts of data, and it's trying to learn how to form sentences and phrases based on your prompt. You might have heard this term called the prompt engineer. That's all of us, basically. Like anything else, the better you prompt, the more specific you are about your intent, the better the output. It started with images at first. And there's a company called NVIDIA. If anybody here invests, they're like one of the hottest companies right now. I think they're the last company to pass the $1 trillion mark, because they make chips that go into electric cars. They make also the chip that's used for computational power for AI. So their stock is like going through the roof. They started by creating something called StyleGAN, which is called a generative adversarial network. I hate the word adversarial, but that's what they call it. Tech people create these things. They're not branding people. That was the first cut, the first generation of text to image. And then it became a diffusion model, right? Where the first version of this what they call the generative adversarial network, is basically creating images of people, even though they're not people, but it looks a lot like portraits. It's really scary and really interesting and exciting at the same time. The diffusion model is basically training hundreds of millions of images with captions describing these images, and it's learning the relationship between what you're typing and the images. So you probably heard of DALL-E. They got a lot of attention. That's part of OpenAI, actually. And Midjourney, that's what a lot of artists and photographers and ad agencies and creative agencies have been playing around with for a couple of years now. Excuse me. This is an example of that adversarial network. Those images on the left are not real people. The computers generated those. And also on the right. It's incredible to me. This is an example of DALL-E, which I believe, and Midjourney, which a lot of folks have been using and playing around with. You can tell it's not real, right? It's like the Pope in the puffer jacket, but it still looks pretty cool. And it looks like somebody created it, but a machine created it. And there's other types of what they call text to, right? Text to music. You can go on Musical LM, which is part of Google, and create a song. You can go on Luma AI. It's text to 3D, text to speech, text to video. Some of this frightens me because this is notion of synthetic media, right? You can take my image and my voice. There's a lot of my voice and a lot of my video on the internet, and you can create videos and voices of things that I did and said that I never really did or say, which is frightening. And all behind this is this thing called the transformer model. It was created back in 2017 by Google, and it is the underlying technology. It is, I don't know if you heard recently, the godfather of AI used to work at Google. He decided to quit, and he's like, the world's going to come to an end. This is really scary. This is really bad. I'm going to pause. He invented this, right? A lot of the large language models are built on this transformer model that was originated through Google. And then Microsoft and others basically appropriated it because it's all open. And then they created their own models, which is what you see with ChatGPT. How does it work? There's a huge corpus of data. You train it, and then there's an interaction. You put in a prompt, you get a response. How can they work better? And what's going on right now is you have the data, it's trained, it's then reinforced with human feedback. This is really, really important, this RLHF acronym, reinforcement learning with human feedback. I would never, with Prophet or with ChatGPT, let the computer generate text and just send it out to a reporter or send it out into the world. You always need to be part of the loop. That's what RLHF is. Some people don't realize that. You have to realize that. The human makes it better. It makes it sentient. It makes it values-based, judgment, etc. And then it's a big loop. The reason why it's called AI is that there's a feedback loop. It learns. It's learning based on your behavior, so it can become better and faster and more accurate at what it does. So this is, I think, kind of mind-blowing if you ask me. Here's how it works behind the scenes, because I always wondered this. So the large language model looks at the prompt. It converts it to tokens. There are the tokens. It's literally taking words, putting them into numbers or tokens, and it's computing the words, but now as numbers. And it's using something called embedding. So basically, it's basically tagging all of these tokens, and then it's putting it through its neural network that I talked about before. It's like how a brain works, right? It's training itself, where that transformer that I talked about earlier comes into play. And it's going to try and put together words and phrases. But before it does that, it generates like 50,000 possibilities, even more, of values, right? And it turns those probabilities into different iterations and tokens, all behind the scenes. And this is happening in nanoseconds. And then it responds with, and it repeats the process, and it responds with the output. So what's happening? It's literally making up a response based on mathematical probabilities. It is not human. It does not understand. It's all math in the background, which terrifies me because I'm not good at math, but I don't mind giving it a prompt and letting other people be good at math. It's one word at a time. There's no database. There's no search. It's not like Google. Okay, it's one word at a time. It's putting these probabilities into sentences. They don't know anything. We know everything. We're giving it the inputs. It is then searching its library, its large language model or data lake, like I talked about before, to try to put it together and structure it, trying to figure out what your intent is. So it looks like intelligence and comprehension, but it's not. It's absolutely not, even though we're kind of blown away by it. So I think about generative and predictive as a collaborator, a teacher, and an assistant. It's not the singularity. It's not taking over. It's not, the world's not going to end because of AI. But I do think that when it comes to having edge, being able to be on top of and perform faster certain tasks, it is incredibly helpful. It's a collaboration loop. You prompt, it does things, it responds, you refine. This is absurdly simple, I'm sorry, but this is the way I think about it. It's going to change the way we work. 4 things that come to mind. 1, look for time-consuming tasks. 2, look for tasks that also might be time-consuming and you really don't like. We all have that in our day job. Sometimes we complain to our loved ones about it. Sometimes we complain to ourselves or our therapists or clergy, right? But complain less, let AI do some of that work for you. Sometimes it's good for inspiration, which is points 3 and 4. Maybe you don't understand something, or maybe you need inspiration for a way to structure a headline, a subhead, a press release, copy, newsletter copy, copy to congregants, whatever it is. It can help you, and it can be incredibly powerful. Now, there are risks, and I want to go through those. It's not going to be accurate. That's your job. Can it hallucinate? Did it try to get that reporter to leave his wife? Sure, it did, but it wasn't real. And the reporter knows that it's not real. AI, in what it gives you, is going to be only as good as what it's been inputted. If a bunch of white guys put in the inputs into that large language model, it's likely, and this is, I'm not casting aspersion on anybody, it's likely it's going to be biased. At the same time, AI can help counter bias. You guys probably don't work with what's called influencers and creators, but in the influencer and creator world, there's a lot of inequities with pay. So white influencers get paid 35% more than Black influencers. It's a very opaque process between a brand or organization and an influencer. AI soon will be able to provide transparency into that process so that there's more equity in that payment system. Copyright issues. So I would strongly suggest, if you're looking to create visual images, that you go to Adobe. If you have an Adobe subscription, Adobe AI is incredible. They have what's called a walled garden. They have rights to all those images. So if you create an image based on what's in their walled garden, you're not violating any copyrights. A lot, and we do this as well with Prophet. If the platform is able to source where they're getting their information from, then you're probably okay. People ask me, well, what about plagiarism? Here's what I've done. When I'm using generative AI, even in Prophet, we call it Tailor, the feature there. I'll take that line or one or two lines, I'll type it into Google search, which is Boolean search, and make sure it doesn't come up anywhere. If it doesn't come up anywhere, the chances are that it's not copyright protected and you're probably okay. There are dangers as well. So dangers to me are around mis and disinformation. AI can be used as an accelerant. There are also AI tools like peak metrics, like fact meta. There's tons of tools that are being developed and created right now to help search and surface dangers like mis and disinformation. And then there's the ethics, which is related to dangers. People ask me, well, shouldn't I disclose that I use generative AI to write something? Now, not many people agree with what I'm about to say, but I think we'll all agree with this maybe in a year. I don't know. When I watch President Biden's State of the Union, you don't at the end see a long list of 50 credits rolling about everybody who wrote that speech and contributed to that speech and fact-checked that speech. You don't disclose when you use Grammarly or spell check or Excel when you're doing math work. I don't believe it's necessary. If that's what you want to do now, fine. I think disclosing is a distraction. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with using generative AI to help you draft something. I really don't. But it's still a question people have. And so I respect that. I think, I have this notion of like, think big, smart, small, act fast, right? Experimentation is great. It's awesome. Do not put anything confidential into a large language model like ChatGPT. Why? Because one, technically, OpenAI owns that data, but also you don't know where that data is going to go. If you work with a professional tool, you'll be guaranteed through an SLA, through an agreement, that that data is yours and that it's ring fenced and it's protected. We talked about ethics. I think it's really important that you always get expert advice. People think I'm an expert. I'm an expert in AI and comms. I'm not an AI expert, just to be clear. I don't know everything. I'm not even sure people who say they're AI experts know everything because it's changing so quickly, like my head's spinning. I had headwinds when I was trying to build this, and now I've got tailwinds. It's a very different environment. It's important that your leadership teams at your organizations understand what this is. It's important that you continue to stay up to date on it. And also, it's not a bad idea. And I see all sorts of brands and organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, and agencies setting up little task forces and across departments to stay ahead of and create guidelines on how and when it should be used. We've got a bunch. I don't know if anybody ever watched Pitch Perfect, but this is a reference to Pitch Perfect. In case anybody gets offended, this is a pop culture reference. And it got clicked on a lot. It was an ad that we had put out there. We have all sorts of, large and small companies and agencies on the platform right now. They're using it to predict media interest and to reach out to reporters in a safe, private way using their native email. And they're also using it to generate, press releases, pitches, take something that is kind of long and boring and to punch it up into something more interesting. So I just thought I'd share that. And I'm not trying to pitch you guys, but just if you're wondering what tools cost, we have a free version. You guys can go onto PRprophet.ai and sign up for free just to get a little flavor of it. We're going to limit a lot, but it gives you a flavor of what we can do. And then we've got like a monthly subscription where you can have up to 5 users. And we have like an enterprise subscription, which is unlimited users, unlimited usage. So we're trying to democratize this and make it accessible for everybody. If you're interested in what's going on in comms tech, we did put a report together. You can go to our website or to the Stackable Marketing Cloud website, and you can download the report. I talk about transparent pay with influencers. We talk about the communications engineer. We talk about predictive, generative. We'll probably do this every year. And, sorry, having a hard time today. If you want to stay kind of abreast of what's going on in this world of AI, we do a free newsletter every other week. We deliver it on Sundays, and we call it Sunday Brunch. And there's a section called Talk Nerdy to Me, which is my favorite. We basically give you updates on everything across multiple sectors and verticals and different industries, what's going on with AI, the good, the bad, the neutral. And I just think it's a great way to stay on top of what's going on. So it's every other week. You can sign up using this QR code or just go to our website. You can sign up there. And before I open up to questions, if you want, Jenny, I'm happy to actually show you the platform if you're interested.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not sure I understand.
Sorry, my watch is talking to me. I think my watch thinks that their name is Jenny now. So how weird is that? All right. That's Zoom. Stand by. Okay. Everybody can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
All right. I just move the dashboard.
Yes, we can see it.
All right. So I'm all logged into the platform. I have nothing to do with Soul Shop. Okay. I literally just took a press release off of PR Newswire, just to use as an example, to show you what generative AI could look like when it comes to comms.
Hey, real quick,
Yeah.
I still see the PowerPoint slide. Is that what I'm supposed to see, or am I supposed to see the platform?
Oh, can you guys see the platform or no?
No, just the PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
All right. Let me stop share.
Thanks.
Let me start share again. Sorry. One of the issues with Zoom, sometimes that happens. Hold on one sec. How about that?
Yes,
Yep,
thank you.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. I like it when technology works. Okay. Hopefully the platform works. Always risky to do a live demo with lots of people. And it's also fun. Okay. So what you're seeing is, we call this Taylor. This is our friend called Taylor, like tailor your pitch, tailor your content. And it's named, I don't know if anybody ever watches Billions. It's named after this algorithmic genius called Taylor and Billions, the show Billions. I know everybody watches Succession. I get it. And I uploaded a press release from PR Newswire. I have no affiliation with this organization. It is, sorry, I have to move everybody around. It is, how many words? I can't see. Sorry, that's the problem with Zoom. It's a lot of words. And as we all know, reporters don't like to get press releases. They like to get pitches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a tone. Imagine that if we were doing some sort of like crisis statement, you're to be contrite or apologetic. In this case, I'm going to make it emotive because the topic is very sensitive and it's difficult. And then I'm going to hit generate. Now, you'll see down below, it says generating content. Stand by. It would take a human a few hours to do what we're doing in about 1 or 2 minutes. Because we're used to things instantly, this might feel like an eternity. But to take a press release and to turn it into a more compelling pitch should take maybe like a real great writer, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Maybe someone who has less experience, could be up to an hour, could be longer. And what we're doing is we're punching it up. That's one way you can do it. The other way we could do it is we can just put in a minimum of 30 words, which is kind of like ChatGPT, but it's not. And it'll create a pitch out of a minimum of 30 words for you. And then that is a pitch that you can then send to reporters. So think of this kind of like a cooking show. And while you're looking at it like a cooking show, I can then decide what countries do I want to pitch a story to. This is clearly a US story. And I also have a podcast database, and we vet specifically for podcasts that accept guests. So once it generates the pitch, it's then going to pitch it for me kind of virtually in the cloud against reporters it thinks would be interested in the pitch in the US, and producers and bookers at podcasts who accept guests, if that makes sense. And then after it does that, I'm going to show you how it personalizes the pitches to reporters. So there you go. Everybody can see that. You see the original content on the left, the generated content on the right, and it makes it a lot more compelling. I just want to show you real quick. It also created social posts. Now, are they perfect? No. Do I want them to be perfect? No, because then I'll be replaced, and I love my job. But it's a start. You can then copy it and put it into your social platform, and you can paste, or you can edit it. You should edit it, but it's giving you, and it's even giving you hashtags, which is pretty cool. Now, if I go back to the pitch, this is something that is a lot shorter and pithier that we can send to a reporter. And if I say, hey, you know what, I like this. If I don't like it and I want to regenerate it, I can do it. I can do what I just did in a different tone, and I can play around with it, which is the whole iterative part of what we do. Let's just say for purposes of the demo, I like it. Then I'm going to hit pitch. And this is where AI is working again. This time it's predictive. It's basically determining what beats, what reporters would be most interested in this topic. Because it's dealing with suicide, we do have a sensitive subjects category. But to me, we have like 2,000 categories. If you just start typing, because I also think it's a healthcare story. If only I could spell. So I can do healthcare. And this is what comes up. And I would probably do conditions because it's a little bit more broad. And then when I hit run and save, I'm doing like virtual pitching. Is my little, I like baseball, sorry, but sometimes it's Mets colors. So what I'm doing now is imagine I'm pitching in the cloud before I pitch in real life, and I'm trying to determine who's going to be most interested in my pitch. Again, you need a human to go through these lists to determine who's going to be the right person, because we understand that AI doesn't have judgment, doesn't have values, right? But right now, what it's doing is it's sorting through millions and millions of articles we ingest every day, and we're matching that pitch against what they've written on the past to determine which reporters might be interested in this currently. So I apologize, my Wi-Fi is a little slow today. There we go. So what it's doing now is it's assigning percentages, and it is saying to me, of all these beats and categories, your best chance at interest in this is probably with podcasters, which actually is quite unusual because usually it's the worst, it indexes the lowest. And these are different beats, right? So if I click on health, and it's saying there's probably not a lot of interest, it's force ranking it from most interested to least interested. And if I click on, let's say Forbes, this guy, Andrew Pulrang, I as a human can then determine, based on his past coverage, as recently as May 23rd, is he the right person? He might not be. It's a little bit more on disabilities, but he might be also. So let's say he is. I'm going to say yes. And I'm training my AI by doing that. If not, I'll say no, and it takes him out of the list. And then what I can do is pick another tone and pitch him personally, customize the pitch. And what I'm doing is I'm scraping his last stories, 3-4 stories. I'm trying to connect what he's written on most recently to what I want him to write about right now. I can make it short, or I can make it more elaborative. I'll make it to the point. and I'm going to hit generate. And I'm doing the same thing I did last time. So remember, I took a press release and I made it into a pitch. And then I surfaced reporters that might most be interested in that pitch. And now I found a reporter who I think I'd like to pitch. And I would like Prophet to then customize that pitch for me that I can send to that reporter. Ordinarily, we want our people to do this, but people don't do it anymore. They just spam reporters generically. Then reporters auto delete, and then you're living in this like sea of rejection and despair. No wonder why PR agencies in particular have an attrition rate of like 30%, which is a mind-boggling number. As someone who's previously written about disability and discrimination representation, I thought this article might be interesting to you. And it shouldn't say art. This is where I would come in and say not article, I would say story, right? That's just our model being funny. So I can just write story and change it. It's really, really tight. And here's the other thing is I have pitch points. This is called tell me why. It's basically what I'm doing here is it's kind of like a math teacher in 3rd grade saying, show me your work. What I'm doing here is I'm giving you algorithmic transparency to give you kind of pitch points of why we put this pitch together the way we did. And if you do get to talk to this reporter, these are the things you need to focus on. And then if I wanted to send this pitch out, I would hit send, and it's going to go to my native email environment, which I'm not going to send the pitch. I haven't done that yet. That would be terrible and kind of funny at the same time. And the reason why it's important it goes to your native email is because a lot of platforms make you pitch out of their platform, and I think there's a huge privacy issue with that. So that's basically a quick show, if you will, or journey through Prophet. I'll stop my share. All right, I'm happy to open it up to questions. I know I threw a lot at you guys.
Well, we have a few questions in the chat. I'm going to start there with one. Sure. Cynthia had asked, in an April issue of The Economist, philosopher Yuval Noah Harari argues that AI will change the course of human civilization. He says the news and advertising industry should be terrified. Why read a newspaper when you could simply consult the Oracle? And she asks, how would you respond to
that? I think he's brilliant. I got through his first book in like 3 years. I kid not. It's a huge book. But I do think that is kind of hyperbolic and overreactionary. And I don't agree with it. You know, I'm not as bright as he is. But I also work in this profession, work in this business. And I think that if anything, it should be able to provide us with greater access to information than we've ever had before. I'm eternally an optimist, though, so I should have disclosed that earlier on. Even though I'm built to be skeptical when I dealt with clients on a day-to-day business, I'm a very optimistic person. I always try to see the bright side of things. One, because it's how I'm built, and two, because I think it's better for my mental health.
Great. Aaron, another question was, how does AI prevent its own AI-generated documents from kind of muddying up that data lake? That, you know, if it's just kind of rolling on its own, how does it keep new content, new coming in?
Well, I think the more people that are in it and the more humans that are part of the loop, and there needs to be more regulation to help make sure that not only is it not muddied, but it's factual. That's my bigger concern. I'm less concerned about the muddying, although that is a concern. But I think a sibling to that is the facts and making sure that it's factual and accurate. And, you know, not to sound like Yuval Harari, but the upcoming election really scares me because I'm worried now more than ever about bots that are AI driven that can spread mis and disinformation on both sides.
Another question that was posted in the chat. There was very little regulation of social media when Facebook was alone in the industry. As a result, there's been a great deal of abuse and serious problems with disinformation. And that resulted in some harm in some cases. To what extent do you think AI needs to be regulated to avoid similar abuse and harm?
It has to be massively regulated. And I also think that, you know, it shouldn't be a distraction because I still think that Facebook, Instagram, which Facebook owns, and TikTok, Snap, all of those, or all of those social media platforms also need more regulation. And I think part of the issue, or what one of the core issues with what you're seeing from those platforms is that there's no algorithmic transparency. They're not telling us how they're doing what they're doing. And I think that with more algorithmic transparency and better content moderation, I think that we'll have less negative impact on society. So that needs to happen both with AI, but I don't think that social media companies should get a pass. I still think they're getting a pass.
Good point. How do you address hallucinations and fact checking in practical terms?
It's the human in the loop. So AI should never be its own loop without a human being part of it. I remember when I first was playing around with ChatGPT, and at the same time, we're working with OpenAI to develop PRprophet. I typed in, who is Aaron Kwittken? And they had me as CEO of Weber Shandwick. I'm like, awesome. That never happened, So it's not going to be perfect, but I like it being less perfect, as long as, again, because we all need jobs, but also, we have to remind ourselves that it is a tool. It is not the lead in the show. It's a supporting actor, if that.
Well, and we've seen situations such as like the fake Keanu Reeves, and like, what does that do with the credibility of the content that we share? Can you speak to that?
I don't totally understand the question, other than I think that schools, I felt like this even before AI became more mainstream. I think that schools, starting in like middle school to high school, remember when we were kids, we used to have home ec. And I think they've gotten rid of that, unfortunately. I don't think my kids know how to use a hammer or sew anything, but actually loved home ec. We need something similar for like home tech, or whatever you want to call it. We need to train our kids on sourcing and understanding facts, and how do you look at a piece of content and determine whether or not it's real or fake. And because there's ways to do that. There's tools out there, and there's ways to train our brains to be able to do that. So that's, I think, incredibly important.
Great. Another question, with OpenAI being backed by Microsoft, is it likely that ChatGPT may eventually be integrated with Word, Outlook, etc.?
It's definitely happening. They said they're going to do it. I forget what they're calling it. It's definitely going to happen. So I think that some of these tools will be bundled in. If you're on Gmail right now, which is not Microsoft, you'll notice that and actually Outlook does this too. It's trying to finish sentences for you based on what you've said before. And Apple just announced the other day that they're going to put that into text, right? I actually kind of like it. And like 80% of the time, it's right. Maybe I'm really boring, but we are, as humans, we kind of are very repetitive and structured and routined. And I think that's basically what it's doing. But you're going to see that in Word and PowerPoint and everything. Absolutely.
One question that was raised is, how do concepts such as faith and spirituality, how are they incorporated into AI, or how could they be misinterpreted and incorporated into it?
Wow. I think that's a question for a higher being, don't you? No, it's so interesting. So does anybody remember the rabbi who wrote a sermon using ChatGPT? So his synagogue is like 3 miles. I'm out east today, 3 miles from me in the Hamptons. And he got a lot of like media coverage for it. And it was terrible, actually. It was awful. I personally would never want to see my rabbi or any member of the clergy use generative AI to write a sermon or a eulogy or wedding vows, anything. I'm perfectly fine with them using it for inspiration, helping them to restructure what they've written maybe, but as like an original piece of work, that would make me sad. That's just me speaking as a human. I hope that doesn't happen. But as a tool, I'm fine with it. It's okay. I think as communicators for religious institutions, when we're looking to help us structure thoughts that were originated with somebody else who's has domain expertise in something, I think it's totally fine.
Thank you. Another question that was posted to the chat. Are you aware of attempts to instill ethical standards into AI work? Are there organizations or foundations dedicated to this? Is it a common topic or isn't even a point of concern among developers?
So the White House about a year ago, pre-ChatGPT, actually issued guidelines on AI, interestingly. And they're very weak. I called it a toothless tiger in an op-ed that I wrote for Campaign magazine. There's no universal set of standards. It's all being done at the local level right now. Certain countries like Italy have banned, I don't know how you do this, ChatGPT, but people can use private networks to be able to mask what they're doing. Universities are trying to. I don't like the B word, the ban word, whether it's books or technologies. Maybe when it comes to guns, but that's for another day. But I think that we have to work with it, not try to work against it. But I do believe in guidelines, and I do believe that they need to be both at the government, at the federal level, state level, and at the organizational level.
Interesting. So you talked a little bit about the possibility, like the tokens and the math. What if there's bad math in it? What happens then?
Well, you see it all the time. That's when hallucinations come in. That's when it's using data that is outdated, or it's completely confusing what you're saying. I love the fact that it's not perfect, and I hope it always stays imperfect, because humans, while we're also imperfect, we're way better than a mathematical equation.
And you're asking a bunch of communicators to do math. I mean,
right. Exactly.
I think we've covered most of another question just came up in the chat. How would you suggest an organization begin to develop an AI policy?
Well, there's a couple things. One is I'm not one of them, I should say. There are consultants out there who can help you do that, because there's always a consultant that can help you do that. I also recognize, though, that nonprofits in particular, in religious institutions, aren't, necessarily swimming in cash. I know this firsthand. But there are some consultants out there. There are some interesting resources online if you just Boolean search Google it. But I think part of it is also just common sense. You have to start with not the technical side of it, but the value side of it. You have to first ask yourself, how do I want to use this technology, if at all? And if so, what are the guardrails? What are the best use cases, and what are the worst use cases? And then how do I put together some guidelines for that? And then how do I train our folks on those guidelines? That's where I would start with a values-based statement, and then use case, and then worry about the tech after that.
Another question.
I'd just like to say thank you before I have to jump off. But Aaron, I'm the Brian Fest from the immediate past president, and this has been amazing. Your insight I can see your enthusiasm, and it definitely appreciates your religious slant on it and your moral background. And I want to say thank you before I lose that chance to say so.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for joining.
Aaron, any closing points that you want to share with the group?
First of all, it's a great honor and privilege to be able to speak to you all. And I appreciate it. And, feel free to reach out to me. And, feel free to sign up for free on the platform if you'd like to. And if you'd like to use the platform in a more formal way, I do give very, very, very deep discounts to any nonprofit, always. So it would be negligible. It'd be very, very small. But keep experimenting, keep learning, stay inquisitive. Don't be afraid of it. Enjoy it, embrace it. At the same time, just keep your eyes wide open and understand, where it can go off the rails.
Well, I've seen in chat that a couple of folks have already signed up for your newsletter, so I think you'll be getting an influx from us here soon.
Cool.
Aaron, thank you so much today on behalf of RCC and our members. We appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the week and stay safe, stay healthy.
You too. Take care, all.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Nice job, Jenny. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jenny.